Welcome to the Short Funk Podcast. I'm Tom Barbalet. Today I want to float a philosophy that I'm running with associated with 40 years and counting. And that is associated with Blondie's song Fade Away and Radiate. My perspective coming to 40 is that I've spent a lot of time, in fact a good portion of my adult life, creating not necessarily friendships, but working relationships where the other parties have not held their part of the bargain. And I'm an active participant in this. I'm as much to blame as anyone through this process. But I noticed that there are a number of people that I've invested a lot of time and energy into that really haven't done anything and have now almost completely disappeared, if not disappeared entirely. And also, the work that I've done for them has not been repaid in kind. So having invested a lot of time and a lot of energy in a variety of different areas, I feel like it was just wasted time. And how do I learn from this? Well, I return to this notion of fade away and radiate as a means of disengaging, but at the same point still leaving a legacy of that work. And I reflect here very heavily in terms of Biota. I think Biota is a good example of this, where I've kind of enacted the strategy anyway, or more importantly, I was really forced to enact the strategy. There wasn't much option associated with Biota than the way that I dealt with it, and that's the way it turned out. But what's more curious is that I've looked for relationships that have come through that. So, for example, Lorenzo Haggerty and what went on, well, it was this year, but it feels like last year, associated with the stuff that I did for him, the kind of bickering with Heron Stone, and what came out of that, which was basically, just a distancing. I thought to myself, the good work that I've done for this person, the good work that I've done for this person's friend, the good work that I've done in general doesn't enable a resolution to this situation. And I think that represents actually the nature of a lot of what I've done here. Now, critically, I'm also looking back and looking at not necessarily friendships or relationships, but certainly things where I could have done better. And I could have lent more assistance at certain times. I'm thinking about this very solidly, and I'll record a separate podcast covertly about this. But I'm certainly looking at a lot of Bob Mottram's work currently, and just thinking the time that Bob put into the Noble Ape simulation and the problems that I encountered with certain aspects of his contributions, it's disproportionate to remove them. Like, the contributions are worth being there. I just need to find a way associated with stabilizing them, getting them in a manageable state, and then reintegrating them back into the simulation. Because at the time, particularly after a year, 2 years, and having this code that was not behaving as it should, my immediate response was just to archive, cut, keep back to the original simulation. But in the somewhat reflective sense, I'll talk about this more in a future short funk, that's not the right approach here. The right approach is probably to actually nurture this code, these ideas, in a way where I could go back to Bob and say, this part isn't working, this isn't how it should work. And there are a variety of strategies that would enable Bob's work to be current in the Noble Ape simulation without, the problems that I experienced of it being in the main simulation causing problems, so it had to be removed. And really, in terms of the friendships that I've had, working relationships, what have you, there are a few folk that have fallen by the wayside through certainly my 30s, that in reflection I feel kind of bad about. And I feel that on one side, you've got a group of folk that were not working for my best interests, or at least not coherently working for my best interests. And then you have my behaviours associated with other folk that have done amazing and interesting work for me. And that this is a critical evaluation, not just associated with how I should distance myself and deal with certain parties, but also how I should approach people that are doing a contributive and positive effort into things that I'm working on. And this kind of criticality is really very interesting, particularly at, a 40-year mark, to think more heavily about how can I do things differently going forward to get people working with me who are going to be long-term assets, and also realize very quickly folks that are just not positive. I'll talk a little bit more about this in future short funk recordings. Tom Barbalet in San Jose, signing out.